Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. I'm teaching a graduate course in career counseling, and some students told me at the end of the class that last night's class was the most valuable yet. So I thought I would describe some of that class's major takeaways. It might be useful not just for career counselors, but to all counselors, therapists, and coaches, and maybe even just people who are interested in getting some career advice or getting advice in general around personal issues. Anyway, most of these takeaways derive from a mock career counseling session that I did conduct with a student in the class last night. The first tip is to sit right, meaning sit around 3 feet away from the client and at a slight angle. If you're head on, that can feel a bit too confrontational, and lean slightly forward, that conveys engagement. Next, focus, really focus. No matter what's going on in your life, when you're working with a client, remember that they are entrusting you to help in a critical part of their life. Laser focus. For example, in advance of the first session, when you're reading a new client questionnaire that they've submitted, look for atypical responses. They're often key to understanding a person and helping him or her find their special place in the world. Also look for threads across their answers, key building blocks in a person's past, present, and possible future. In the session, hypothesize, and then watch like a hawk, listen like a spy. I talked about hypothesizing a moment ago. Maintain an experimental mindset in your counseling. Counseling is as much art as science. So yeah, create hypotheses as to what you think is really going on with the client and what might work, but treat your hypothesis as just a hypothesis to be confirmed or refuted as the additional evidence is revealed. Next, ask questions to define the problem. For example, what's the roadblock, do you think? Or what do you think is really keeping you from going after that career with vigor? Give 2 or 3 choices. That's useful not only when you're not sure which is right for the client, but as a way of focusing a scattered discussion. For example, the client may explain lots of things about what they're wanting in a career, but it feels all kind of diffuse. So it can help to say something like, in light of what you've said, 2 or 3 career possibilities come to mind. I'm wondering if each of these is close to on the mark. And then you'll get run by the 2 or 3 of them. Don't necessarily bite on quote-unquote obvious areas to discuss. For example, if a client has a history of trauma, it's tempting to assume that that's impeding their moving forward and that revisiting it is a wise use of session time. It may not be. Guess or ask the question directly. Like, your new client questionnaire said that you were abused as a child and that you were in therapy for that. Even though this is career counseling, sometimes additional processing is needed for you to move forward in your career. Other times we can try to put the past in the past and try to move forward. In your case, which do you think is wiser? Note body language. There are no surefire tells. A body movement can mean one of a number of things or nothing. But do be aware of changes from the client's baseline. For example, they start crossing their arms. Their voice gets higher pitched or more intense. Their foot starts shaking. Regarding that, many people try to hide that they're saying something uncomfortable by maintaining a flat face. But they're less likely to be aware of changes in their hands and especially their feet. But, as I said, treat any observed body language changes not as a tell, but as a sign that something of interest may be going on. Again, it's fine to develop a hypothesis of what's going on, but maintain that experimental mindset, checking it out and dropping your hypothesis if it's seeming wrong. Don't be afraid to admit you don't understand. Clients generally appreciate your caring enough to admit that. So in that mock session that I did last night, I said, a few minutes ago you said X, but now you're saying Y. Is there a way to reconcile the two, or have you changed your mind, or am I misunderstanding something? Next, sometimes do what I call play deaf. A client may say something you think is wise to not address, at least for now. For example, a client may complain about former bosses that you think is unreasonably deflecting responsibility from the client. But now may not be the right time to probe that. Sometimes it's wise to just nod and ask a question that redirects the conversation to territory that's more likely to be helpful. Give earned praise. Look for opportunities to give earned praise and point out any career implications. For example, you have a most gentle, accepting personality. How might you use that in your career? Avoid la land BS. This is the flip side of that previous item, giving earned praise. Too many counselors are so concerned they might be judgmental that they support clients' lottery-odd dreams. For example, making a living as a talk show host when the client isn't very bright or interesting. At minimum, per that earlier item, you might play deaf. Or if you feel you should deal with it, ask a question such as, do you see the risk-reward of trying to get trained and then make a living as a talk show host worth the opportunity cost, what you otherwise could be doing with the time and money? By the way, did I mistakenly say play dead instead of play deaf? If so, I apologize. I mean play deaf. Have the client pace. When you sense there's enough input on the table and you want the client to sift it and gain ownership in the forthcoming plan, say something like, presidents often meet while walking in the woods. It's calming, and the walking adds oxygenation to the brain. So pretend you're in peaceful surrounds. Start pacing and talk aloud to gain some clarity about what you want to do. Just start talking. Little by little, you'll probably unearth nuggets. Pretend I'm not here. Okay, begin. Switch seats. Another technique for empowering the client, especially when you're tempted to give advice that seems obvious that you think the client could come up with on their own, switch seats and you play the client, paraphrasing what he or she said, and the client plays you. For example, in the mock session last night, the student who's playing the client said, I was abused as a child and so I now hide. I don't want to be the center of attention, so I shrink when I'm praised in a group because then people will be watching me more closely, judging me. I responded to the client and say, okay, let's switch seats. I'm you and you're me. We switched seats and I paraphrased what he said. Then he, playing me, gave himself quite good advice. He said something like, it's been 30 years since I've been an abused kid. I need to try to put that behind me. Besides, it's worth enduring some extra scrutiny in exchange for not having to hide. Might you want to do some thinking about X? That's a question I like to ask. Might you want to do some thinking about X? Without being too prescriptive and hierarchical, that question, might you want to do some thinking about X, encourages the client to think or research more deeply about something. In the mock session, I asked, might you want to think or research a bit about the cultural norms in your new place of employment? Give breathing space. The tactics I've just listed usually yield rapid progress, but they bring a potential side effect. That is, not giving the client time to reflect. When I feel that might be the case, I'll say, for example, let's slow down. Take 15 seconds to get in touch with how you're really feeling about this draft plan. 15 seconds of silence starts now. Or I might say, I'm deliberately being quiet. Take your time and think, and then when you're ready, take the conversation where you want. Take stock. Toward the end of the mock session, I said, let's pretend the session's over. Picture yourself walking out of my office with what we've discussed as your draft game plan. You're going to do A, B, and C. How would you feel? That usually reveals any unresolved issues. And finally, end on a positive note. For example, at the beginning of the mock session, the student client gushed about his perfect marriage. I ended by jokingly saying, I'm jealous of your marriage. More often, I will end with something like, we're off to a good start, or you worked hard and well in this session. Onward and upward. Anyway, I thank you for watching. Feel free to give a thumbs up or if needed a thumbs down to this. Write a comment, hit the share button, share on your social media, and subscribe if you will. In any case, I do appreciate your watching. I am Marty Nemko.